Is your mom the reason you're overweight? Okay, no. So this video is not only about moms. I'm not gonna throw them under the bus. We're gonna talk about family systems in general and how they affect your weight. And it's very important to understand it because unless you do realize it, sometimes it can make significant changes in your life. So the way our subconscious is developed, and our subconscious, pretty much I talk about every single video, it controls our body, right? Our body functions, everything in our body. So it also controls the weight. So whatever weight you are, that's your subconscious doing. Sorry, your thing right here. All you need to change right here in order to change your life and change your body. So let's talk about how our subconscious is developed. And I'm gonna link the video below also about the way our subconscious works so you can understand it better. Because once you understand it better, it's so easier to understand yourself and see, the pitfalls when it comes to weight loss or other habit change or life changes. But on the short term, our subconscious is developed from age 0 to about 9, 10. That's where it soaks in all the information it sees around without any critical thinking. So it's not thinking about it right or wrong, it just soaks it in and takes it as literally as possible, right? So it sees parents and it looks at parents' habits and it takes it in and remembers right here to make sure that you survive when you become a parent yourself or when you become an adult yourself, right? So that is why social conditioning and family systems are so important until you become age 10 or 11. That's where teenage years come, and that's where the critical thinking starts coming in, right? And teenagers, they question pretty much everything and they don't have authority, so they don't like authority. So that's where our brain develops and starts thinking about stuff. Is it right? Is it wrong? But before that, it was taking everything in literally the way it is, and it was thinking that's the way it's supposed to be. So if your family, right, before age 9 had a certain food habits or had a certain conditioning related to food, you have taken the same condition that you had before in your family, and you right now probably using it in your own adult life, right? So, and that's the way it works. We learn everything from our parents. We learn everything from our surroundings, right? From school, from parents, from friends. So that's where we get all our information and all our habits. So if you think about it, I mean, they are responsible for our weight habits, right? For our food habits, for our exercise habits. So these people are responsible for the way we are right now, unless you already try to change yourself and change your habits, right, and try to improve yourself in certain ways. But whatever it becomes before, that's what you bring in your life. So if your family didn't have healthy food habits or they didn't have really good, healthy habits, probably you've taken it with you. So let's take a look at the most common thing that I usually see, and that some of them apply to my life and my family, right? That I brought it in my adulthood until I changed it later because I realized that's what's happening. Once I know it is happening, I realize that I can change it, right? So let's take a look at some of them. So, social conditioning when it comes to food. So, in my culture, it's customary to force kids to eat even if they don't want to. So, they're just like shoving food and they open their mouth, like shove food and try to distract the poor kid. So, it eats the food and it eats the exact amount of food. So, I remember there were a few books, right, on parenting and how much kids are supposed to eat in a certain age, right? Or how much they there were different books about that back then. I remember that parents were reading, and that's where they got all this information. So it's not like we should be blaming our parents because they forced us to eat, right? We shouldn't be putting blame on anyone else. And this video is not about blaming someone, especially mothers, because mothers are doing an amazing job raising their kids and they want the best for them. But sometimes they don't realize that that's what's happening. That's what they're teaching the kids to be, and that will affect kids in the future life, right? And in my culture, it's very customary And you're actually a really good mom if you force your kid to eat. So you, like, in order to be a good mom, you gotta force your kid to eat food, which is completely unreasonable. You shouldn't be forcing your kids to eat because they know how to. They know how much the food they need. They know how much, nutrition they need. They know what kind of food they like or they don't like, and that's for a reason as well. Maybe the food they don't like, maybe it's not good for them. They're kind of more intuitive than we are. So forcing your kid to eat all the time will develop very unhealthy habits where in later life your kid will start overeating more and more and more, just forcing to finish the plate, right? And finishing your plate is another one. Ooh, that's a big one. I remember in my childhood, um, it, it was customary, especially the older generation, the generation that went through war, that went through lack of food at some point. It was customary, first of all, to encourage kids to ask for more food. So once you finish your whole portion, like your whole plate, it's very customary to ask for more. And then the grandma, I remember how she used to force you, like, well, here's Nadia. She's asking for more food because she likes it, and she's a good girl because she's eating, extra portion of food that is good for her. So that kind of encouragement, of eating more and more and more, and they did it from a very positive perspective because they went through periods of time in their life where they didn't have food at all. I remember my grandma used to tell me a story during the wartime. She was little and they had literally no food in the village to eat. And it was cold. It was already becoming fall time. And she dug the dirt and found a piece of rotten potato, and she was eating it, and she was eating that rotten potato, raw potato, because she had no food, no other food to eat. And that is the worst story I've ever heard. But uh those are the people that raised that, right? Those are the people that went through Great Depression, right? That went through limitations where at some point they didn't have maybe finances for food, or they didn't have food on the table, and they knew how it is and they knew how bad it is. So of course they want grandchildren to eat more, to eat healthy, to become cute chubby kitties. And back then chubby meant healthy because you were eating good food, right? And you were storing some fat in case starvation comes in, which is totally I guess totally understandable from their point of view, because they went through this horrible, horrible time where they didn't have food, right? But again, right now, like in most countries, people live where they have food. In some countries, of course, they don't, which is terrible. But uh, you know, we live in a society where we have abundance of food. Eating too much food actually doesn't give us any benefit. It makes everything worse because we become unhealthier and unhealthier, right? So if that kind of habit developed from very early age, and it did for me, I remember uh, I still feel bad if I don't finish my plate, especially if I'm visiting, and this relating, emotions to food and how others feel. I remember it. It's so customary to go to someone's place, and if they put the full plate of food in front of you, you have to finish it, because if you don't finish it, the person will feel very upset that you didn't like the food, that you didn't finish the food, and they take it on them that you didn't finish that food, and they will feel offended that you didn't finish that food, which is totally terrible because they link in their emotions to food and they expect from you to overeat and maybe eat something that you don't need right now. It's totally unhealthy, but in so many cultures, that's the way it is, and that's what you need to realize and find ways to avoid the situation, or not to offend the person and work the situation, or maybe explain, because in some cultures it's just not as good. Here, I live in America. I feel like it's a little bit better, where people understand that if you don't want to eat the food, it's okay for you not to eat it. If you don't want to finish your plate, it's okay to take it home, right? And don't finish your plate, or it's okay to throw it away. But again, we came from, especially my family, throwing away food wasn't an option because it was wasting food. Because when the people went through that kind of traumatic experience where they didn't have food for such a long time, wasting food for them is just unthinkable. It's the worst thing that you can do. And that kind of experiences we soak in as children, and then we go into adult life overeating. And even though our grandparents or maybe our parents did it for very good reason, right, to for our survival, for our protection, for our benefit, as they thought. But eventually it becomes, for many people, it becomes toxic or unhealthy, where they keep overeating and overeating because of these old habits that they ingrained during childhood. So there are a lot of things like that. So feeding kids something they don't like, also force feeding the same thing, right? Not finishing up your plate, shaming and blaming, and relating any kind of emotion to food. Again, that's not good to relate emotions to food, because those shouldn't be related to each other. Food is a fuel for the body. Emotions are emotions. They should be separate. But a lot of parents do link emotion and food, and that's why so many people in our age struggle with emotional eating, because that's where it comes from. It comes from childhood. Also, I know some parents use sugar, especially, as a manipulating tool to get their kids to do what they want, which is totally not good as well, because it creates issues later in life. So let's say if you do homework, I'm gonna give you a piece of candy, right? Or if you do a chore, you will get a reward, and this reward comes in terms of food or maybe fast food or something they don't usually get. So it's like, kind of a reward that they get. And what the brain learns from that experience is that after doing some kind of work or something that they don't want to do, they can get a reward in terms of candy or in terms of fast food or something like this, right? And a lot of people come into adult life, they don't realize what's happening. Let's say after a long day at work that they probably hate it, right? Like a person is their work, and then they work the whole day to make sure that they make money to support family, and then they come home and they feel this urge to eat this heavy food, or maybe fast food, or maybe a lot of sugar, because they feel like they need a reward. But that again, that link that happened in the childhood, that shouldn't be there, because food is not a reward. Food is a fuel. It shouldn't be linked as a reward. It shouldn't be related to any kind of emotion, and it shouldn't be there at all. So parents, when they do that, they actually link it, and that's not healthy, and they don't realize it, because it's so natural in our society. It's so common that everyone is doing it, like we never even think about it. And also, when we talk about social conditioning and family systems, it's also about habits, right? About how your family eats, what kind of relationship with food they have. You also take on the same relationship they have with food. You do the same in your adult life. That's how our brain learns. That's how our brain repeats the same patterns as our parents have, as our people that we close to have. So it can be anything. It can be related to exercise. It can be related to moving. It can be related as a food reward. It can be related to watching TV and eating, right? Where you also overeat because you don't realize that when you watch TV, you don't realize that you eat too much. Like all of these small habits that we learn as children, they come from our family life, or maybe like during the feast, right? Everyone just eats to the top, and no one has limitation, and it's customary to overeat constantly. Or or maybe like family never worked out, and they were just sitting watching TV all day long, right? And eating, and that of course becomes a habit once the person grows up, and becomes the same thing. They repeat the same thing. So of course, they will overeat while they're watching TV. Of course, they'll start gaining weight because of that. Because if you overeat, you consume more food than you need to. Of course, you start gaining weight. So this all kind of situation, like or maybe family didn't have a habit of working out, or they weren't active. It wasn't customary for them, any kind of thing, any kind of condition that comes from the family, it can affect adult life, and we don't realize it. Once we become an adult, it becomes, work, other things. You don't think about it, right? You don't think what you're doing every day. You don't look at your habits and say, well, my parents were doing it, and right now I'm doing it. Maybe I should stop and not do it. We do it unconsciously, and that's how our subconscious work. It's it's an automation machine, right? It's just doing it on automation, and it's easy for your subconscious to do. But this video is for you to realize that there's so many habits that can affect your life that you didn't develop yourself. It came from family, from maybe friends, from your social surroundings when you were a kid. But right now, you have the power to change it. Right now, you are aware that this was happening. Right now, you are aware that that's what brought your problem. But also, no, we're not gonna put blame on our parents and say, okay, mom, you made me fat, right? No, that's not nice, because every single mother, I mean, most of the mothers, they raise the kids the best way they can, right? They do the best for the kids, and they're trying to give them the same experience, what they think is best for them. And they also don't think about it, right? Before, they didn't have that many books to read about parenting. Before, it was simpler time where parents didn't care about that much, and they didn't have the same research that we have right now. They didn't have the same awareness that we have right now. So it was a different time. And again, our grandparents, they came from very traumatic time, where world wars and starvation, all of these things that kind of affected the generation. So it still affects us, but we shouldn't be putting blame on them. But it's still our responsibility to recognize that it's affected our life, and also that we can change it. So my advice, just start noticing what you do in your life, and once you go visit your family, see what they do, start realizing, okay, I'm doing this habit and this habit and this habit. And that's where it came from, right? Where I try to calm myself down with sugar, or where I try to give myself a reward after a long day at work, right, with sugar. So all of these things, they come from family, and you learned it somewhere. And yes, you can unlearn it. You can change it. It just taking time, taking effort to do it, and changing habits is very important if you want to change your life. Because once you change your habit, it becomes your life, and then it becomes you. So it's a new identity for you. So yeah, take a look at your life and let me know in the comments below. Maybe I missed some of I did the most common one. The most common issues. Did I say issues? Most common social conditioning that I remember from my childhood, what I described pretty much, I went through all of it. And then it took me such a long time to finish eating, stop eating without finishing my plate, right? It took me such a long time to actually throw away food. I mean, most of the time I don't throw it away, I still put it in the fridge, and later if it gets spoiled, I throw it away. I still felt bad about it. And most of the time, I still feel bad if I go to visit someone, especially a close relative, and if they put a plate in front of me, I still kind of like, I don't want it. I don't want to upset them. So it's still a tricky situation where you try to figure it out, because of course you love your family. Of course you want them to feel really good, but you also need to take care of yourself. So yes, it's still challenging in some situations. Yes, they're linking emotion to food also there. So it took me a while to work on that too, and to find other ways how I can substitute, calming myself instead of eating food, maybe doing something else, right? Substitute those kind of coping mechanisms. So yeah, that was very personal for me. And I've had pretty much experience with all of them. So let me know in the comments below if you have, if like those common social conditions, like what was in your family or used in life, where it really affects the way people eat, and really affects the relationship with food. And people struggle with it, because this is kind of conditioning where people struggle later to change it, but it's still possible. So if you want to change your life, you can do it. Definitely do it. Definitely do it, because it will become easier and better. It just takes a little bit of time, but it's possible. So I hope you guys like the video. Like, subscribe, it really helps the channel. I do more videos about intuitive eating and other mind power things. So let me know in the comments what you think, and I'm really excited to see you in the next video.